Look, I'm not the kind of guy who believes in weird stuff. Never have been. I work nights at a 24-hour diner off Route 66, just outside Bakersfield. Nothing fancy, just hash browns, coffee that could strip paint, and truckers who tip in crumpled singles. My job is simple. Keep the grill running, serve whoever walks through that door, and try not to fall asleep during the dead hours between 3 and 6 a.m. The place is called Mel's, though I've never met anyone named Mel. Been working here for about 2 years now, ever since I dropped out of community college. My mom thinks I'm wasting my life, but honestly, I don't mind it. There's something peaceful about the routine. Clock in at 11 p.m., clock out at 7 a.m., go home, sleep, repeat. No drama, no surprises. The diner sits by itself on a stretch of desert highway that doesn't see much action anymore. Most people take the interstate now. We get maybe 15 customers on a good night, long-haul drivers mostly, sometimes a family whose car broke down, occasionally some sketchy dude who pays in cash and doesn't make eye contact. I've learned not to ask questions. Behind the counter, we've got this old emergency radio that the previous shift guy left behind. One of those weather alert things that's supposed to warn you about tornadoes and flash floods and missing kids. It mostly just sits there humming quietly, picking up static from the interstate or random chatter from truckers' CB radios. Every now and then it'll crackle to life with a test message or some weather update for counties I've never heard of. Tonight started like any other. I flipped the open sign, started a fresh pot of coffee, and settled in behind the counter with a paperback thriller I'd been working through for the past week. The radio buzzed softly in the background, tuned to some emergency frequency that barely came through clearly. Around 1 a.m. this trucker rolled in. Big guy, maybe 50-something, wearing a John Deere cap and boots that had seen better days. He ordered black coffee and apple pie, sat at the far end of the counter, and spent most of his time staring out the window at his rig. We didn't talk much. I'm not big on conversation with customers, they're usually just passing through anyway. He finished his pie, left a 5 on the counter, and headed back to his truck. I watched him through the window as he climbed into the cab and fired up the engine. The diesel rumbled loud enough to rattle the windows, then faded as he pulled back onto the highway and disappeared into the darkness. That's when the radio started acting up. It began with the usual 3-tone alert signal, those sharp electronic beeps that always make your skin crawl a little. I looked up from my book, expecting the standard weather warning or missing person alert. Instead, there was just silence. Dead air for maybe 10 seconds. Then a voice came through. Clear as anything. "This is an emergency alert for Michael Anthony Rodriguez." I froze. That's my name. My full name. The one from my birth certificate, the one nobody uses except my mom when she's really ticked off at me. "Please remain at your current location. Do not attempt to leave the building. Do not make phone calls. Estimated duration, 45 minutes. The message ended there. No explanation, no contact information, no indication of where it came from. Just static. I stared at the radio, waiting for it to repeat or clarify or do something that would make sense of what I just heard. Nothing. Just the usual background hiss of empty airwaves. My first thought was that it had to be a prank. Maybe one of the day shift guys had figured out how to hack into the emergency broadcast system. But that seemed way too elaborate for the kind of simple jokes they usually pulled. Plus, how would they know my full name? I'd never told anyone at work my middle name. I tried to shake it off and went back to my book, but I couldn't focus on the words. Every few minutes I'd glance at the radio, half expecting it to crackle to life again. The coffee pot gurgled. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Outside, the highway stretched empty in both directions, just dark asphalt disappearing into the desert. At 1:47 a.m., I remember the exact time because I kept checking the clock. The radio went off again. Same 3 tones. Same pause. Then, "Michael Anthony Rodriguez. You are thinking about calling your sister. Please do not do this. It will complicate the situation." My blood went cold. I had been thinking about calling Elena. She works late shifts at a hospital in LA, and I'd been considering whether to text her about the weird radio message. But I hadn't moved toward my phone. Hadn't even taken it out of my pocket. This time I got up and walked over to the radio. It was just a basic emergency receiver, the kind you can buy at any electronics store. Nothing fancy, no special modifications that I could see. I checked the frequency display, 162.550 MHz, standard NOAA weather radio. But NOAA doesn't send personalized messages to random diner workers in the middle of nowhere. I picked up the radio and turned it over, looking for some kind of hidden transmitter or microphone. Nothing. Just the usual warning labels and FCC compliance stamps. I set it back down and backed away, my heart starting to pound a little faster. The smart thing would have been to ignore it. Write it off as some kind of technical glitch or elaborate hoax. But something about the voice kept nagging at me. It wasn't the usual robotic text-to-speech you hear on most emergency alerts. This sounded human. Tired, maybe even a little sad. I decided to test it. I walked over to the coffee pot and started to pour myself a fresh cup, moving deliberately so that if something was watching me, it would be obvious what I was doing. The radio crackled immediately. Michael Anthony Rodriguez. The coffee is already cold. You poured it at 12:43 a.m. and haven't touched it since. Drinking more will not help you stay alert for what's coming. I nearly dropped the pot. The voice was right. I had poured that cup over an hour ago and forgotten about it. But more than that, there was something in the tone that made my skin crawl. What's coming? Like it knew something I didn't. I set the coffee pot down and looked around the diner. Empty booths, flickering neon sign in the window, everything exactly the way it should be. But suddenly it all felt different. The shadows seemed deeper. The silence outside felt heavier. I walked to the front window and peered out at the highway. Nothing but darkness and the distant glow of a truck stop about 5 miles south. My car was parked around back where I always left it. I could see the edge of the bumper from where I stood. The radio spoke again, unprompted this time. Michael Anthony Rodriguez. You are considering leaving through the back exit. The vehicle parked behind the building is not your car. My chest tightened. I pressed my face against the glass and strained to see around the corner of the building. In the faint light from the diner's back door, I could make out the shape of a car. Dark colored, about the right size. But now that I really looked at it, something seemed off. The shape was wrong somehow. Too low or maybe too wide. I grabbed my keys from behind the counter and headed for the back door. The radio's voice followed me. Michael Anthony Rodriguez. Please reconsider. I pushed through the door anyway and stepped into the cool desert air. My footsteps echoed off the concrete as I walked toward the parking area. The motion sensor light kicked on, flooding the space behind the diner with harsh white light. The car wasn't mine. It was the same color, dark blue, and roughly the same size. But it was definitely not my beat-up Honda Civic. This car was newer, sleeker. A sedan I didn't recognize. The license plate was different too, though from where I stood I couldn't make out the numbers. I walked closer, fishing my phone out of my pocket. The screen showed no signal, unusual but not unheard of out here in the middle of nowhere. Still, I tried calling 911. Nothing. The call wouldn't even attempt to connect. That's when I noticed the car's windows. They were tinted so dark they looked almost black. Not just privacy tinting, this was the kind of stuff you see on government vehicles or hearses. I couldn't see inside at all. I tried my car key in the door handle just in case. Obviously it didn't work. The car remained locked, silent, giving nothing away. As I stood there trying to figure out what was happening, I heard the radio through the open back door of the diner. Even from outside, the voice came through crystal clear. Michael Anthony Rodriguez. Return to your position. The replacement period is almost over. Replacement period. What the hell did that mean? I jogged back inside, leaving the mysterious car in the parking lot. The radio was quiet now, just the usual static. I checked the clock, 2:15 a.m. Still hours until my shift ended, and now I was stuck here with no way to leave and no idea what was going on. I tried the landline phone behind the counter. No dial tone. I tried my cell phone again, still no signal. I wasn't just receiving weird messages, I was completely cut off from the outside world. That's when I heard the first car door slam. It came from the front parking lot, followed by the sound of footsteps on gravel. Someone was approaching the diner. I moved to the front window and peered out. A figure walked toward the entrance. Average height, wearing dark clothes, moving with purpose but not hurrying. As they got closer to the light from the diner's windows, I could see it was a man, maybe middle-aged, wearing a black jacket and jeans. He reached the door and stopped. For a long moment he just stood there looking in at me. I couldn't make out his face clearly through the glass, but something about his posture seemed wrong. Too still. Too patient. Then he raised his hand and knocked. 3 slow, deliberate taps. I didn't move. Every instinct told me not to open that door. The man waited a few seconds, then knocked again. Same rhythm, same pressure. He wasn't impatient or angry. He was just waiting. The radio crackled to life behind me. Michael Anthony Rodriguez. Do not engage with the visitor. He is not who he appears to be. I turned back to the window. The man was still there, still waiting. As I watched, he lifted his hand to knock a 3rd time. But instead of knocking, he pressed his palm flat against the glass and left it there. His hand was wrong. The proportions were off, fingers too long, palm too narrow. And when he moved, it didn't look quite natural. Like he wasn't used to operating that body. I backed away from the window, my heart hammering against my ribs. The man or thing or whatever it was remained perfectly still, hand pressed against the glass, face turned toward me. The radio spoke again. Michael Anthony Rodriguez. The first replacement has arrived. 2 more are en route. Maintain your position until 6:47 a.m. Do not acknowledge their presence. 6:47 a.m. That was still over 4 hours away. I looked back at the window. The figure was gone. But I could hear footsteps circling the building. The footsteps moved slowly around the perimeter of the diner. Methodical, like someone taking measurements or looking for weaknesses. I tracked the sound as it went from the front window to the east side of the building, then around back toward the parking area where that strange car was waiting. I stayed behind the counter trying to keep calm. The radio had gone quiet again, just humming with static. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly in all directions, no help, no witnesses, just me and whatever was walking circles around this place. The footsteps stopped at the back door. I heard the handle rattle as someone tested it. The door was locked. I'd made sure of that after checking on the car. But the rattling continued for maybe 30 seconds, like whoever was out there was trying to figure out how the mechanism worked. Then silence. I waited, straining to hear any sound that might tell me where they'd gone. Minutes passed. My shift was supposed to be boring, coffee, customers, maybe a drunk trucker or two. Not this. Not hiding from something that pretended to be human. At 2:43 a.m., headlights swept across the front windows. Another car was pulling into the parking lot. I crouched behind the counter and peered over the edge, watching as a white pickup truck parked next to the spot where my Honda should have been. The engine cut off and a woman got out. She looked normal enough from a distance. Blonde hair, casual clothes, moving like any regular customer who might stop for late-night coffee. But as she walked toward the entrance, I noticed the same thing I'd seen with the first visitor. Her movements were slightly off. Too precise. Too deliberate. She reached the door and knocked. Same 3 taps, same rhythm. I crouched lower, hoping she'd think the place was closed despite the neon open sign flickering in the window. She waited, then knocked again. Then she pressed her face against the glass and cupped her hands around her eyes, trying to see inside. Her face was wrong too. Features too symmetrical, skin too smooth. Like a photograph of a person rather than an actual person. She stayed pressed against the glass for a long time, scanning the interior of the diner methodically. The radio whispered, "Michael Anthony Rodriguez. The second replacement is conducting reconnaissance. Remain hidden." After what felt like forever, the woman stepped back from the door. But instead of returning to her truck, she walked around to the side of the building. I heard her footsteps join the first set, both of them now moving around the diner in opposite directions. They were coordinating, searching for another way in. I checked all the locks, front door, back door, the service entrance by the kitchen. Everything was secure, but these weren't normal doors. The glass was just regular window glass. If they really wanted to get in, they could break it easily enough. But they weren't trying to break in. They were just circling, waiting for something. At 3:20 a.m., a third vehicle arrived. This time it was a motorcycle. The rider was wearing a full helmet and leather jacket, but same deal, the movements were too smooth, too mechanical. They parked, dismounted, and walked straight to the front door without any hesitation. 3 knocks. 3 seconds of waiting. 3 more knocks. I was starting to see the pattern. They all moved the same way, knocked the same way, waited the same amount of time. Like they were following a script or operating from the same set of instructions. The motorcyclist joined the other 2 in their slow orbit around the building. 3 sets of footsteps now, evenly spaced, walking in perfect rhythm. I could track them by sound as they passed the windows, east wall, back wall, west wall, front wall, repeat. The radio crackled, "Michael Anthony Rodriguez. All 3 replacements are now in position. They will maintain surveillance until the transition window opens at 6:47 a.m. Do not attempt to leave. Do not attempt to signal for help. Transition window. Replacements." None of this made any sense, but the message was clear. I was supposed to stay put for another 3 hours while these things walked in circles outside. I tried my phone again. Still no signal. The landline was still dead. Even the internet connection for the point-of-sale system had gone dark. I was completely isolated. Around 4 a.m. the walking stopped. All 3 of them simultaneously just stopped moving. The sudden silence was somehow worse than the footsteps had been. At least when they were walking, I knew where they were. I crept to the front window and risked a look outside. The 3 vehicles were still parked in the lot, but I couldn't see any of the figures. They could be anywhere, crouched behind the cars, pressed against the walls, waiting by the doors. I retreated to the kitchen and grabbed the biggest knife I could find. Not that I had any intention of fighting these things, but it made me feel slightly less helpless. I sat behind the counter with my back to the wall and waited. At 4:33 a.m., I heard a new sound. Scratching. It started at the east window, long, slow scrapes like fingernails on glass. Then it moved to the next window, then the next. They were testing the windows, looking for a weak point or maybe just trying to get my attention. The scratching continued for about 10 minutes, working its way around the entire building. When it reached the front windows, I could see one of the figures through the glass. The woman from the pickup truck, standing just outside the light, dragging her fingernails across the window in deliberate, measured strokes. Her fingernails were too long, and they scraped glass like they were made of metal. The radio spoke again. Michael Anthony Rodriguez. They are attempting to provoke a response. Do not react. Do not make noise. The transition window will open in 2 hours and 14 minutes. I set the knife down and covered my ears, trying to block out the awful scratching sound. But it seemed to come from everywhere at once, all the windows, all around the building, a symphony of fingernails on glass that made my teeth ache. Then it stopped. Complete silence returned to the desert night. I uncovered my ears and listened carefully but heard nothing. No footsteps, no scratching, no sound of movement outside. I waited 5 minutes, then crept back to the window. The parking lot looked empty. All 3 vehicles were still there, but I couldn't see any of the figures who'd arrived in them. That's when I noticed the handprints on the glass. They covered every window I could see from inside the diner. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Palm prints and fingerprints pressed against the glass from the outside, overlapping and smeared together like a crowd of people had been trying to push their way in. But there had only been 3 of them. And the prints were all different sizes, some small like a child's, others huge with fingers that stretched too far. Like the 3 figures weren't the only things that had been circling the building. I grabbed a flashlight from behind the counter and shined it through the front window, trying to see past the parking lot to the highway beyond. The beam cut through the darkness for maybe 50 yards before being swallowed by the desert night. In that circle of light, I saw them. Not just 3 figures. Dozens of them. Standing perfectly still in the scrub grass and sand, just beyond the diner's property line. They were arranged in a rough circle around the building, all facing inward, all waiting. Some looked like the 3 I'd seen earlier, normal people in normal clothes. Others were wrong in obvious ways. Too tall, or bent at impossible angles, or missing pieces that should have been there. A few didn't look human at all. I turned off the flashlight immediately and backed away from the window. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. The radio whispered, "Michael Anthony Rodriguez. You have seen the full assembly. They have been gathering since sunset. You are the focus of their attention. What do they want?" I said aloud, forgetting that I was supposed to stay quiet. The response was immediate. "Michael Anthony Rodriguez. You are speaking. This is not recommended." Outside I heard movement. All of them, dozens of figures taking a single step closer to the building. Then stopping. I clamped my hand over my mouth and tried to breathe quietly through my nose. The silence stretched on, tense and waiting. After what felt like an eternity, I heard them all take a step back. They were responding to sound. The radio was right. I couldn't let them know I was awake and aware. The next hour passed in absolute silence. I sat behind the counter, not moving, not speaking, barely breathing. The handprints on the windows caught the light from inside the diner and threw strange shadows across the walls. Every few minutes I'd check the clock, counting down to 6:47 a.m. and whatever transition window meant. At 5:45 a.m. the radio spoke again, "Michael Anthony Rodriguez. The transition window will open in 62 minutes. Prepare for final instructions." Final instructions. That didn't sound good. I looked around the diner, trying to figure out if there was anywhere to hide or any other way out. The building was basically a rectangle with windows on all sides. The kitchen had a small storage room, but no exit. There was a bathroom, but it had a window too. Nowhere to go that they couldn't see me. The radio continued, "Michael Anthony Rodriguez. At 6:47 a.m., the transition window will open for exactly 3 minutes. During this time, the assembly will approach the building. You must choose." "Choose what?" I whispered, then immediately regretted speaking. This time there was no movement outside. Maybe they were too far away to hear a whisper. "Michael Anthony Rodriguez. You may accept the transition and join the assembly. Or you may resist and face the consequences of remaining unchanged." The words hit me like ice water. Join the assembly. Become one of those things standing in the desert, waiting for the next person to be trapped in here. What happens if I resist? I breathed, barely making any sound at all. Long pause. Then, Michael Anthony Rodriguez. Previous subjects who resisted ceased to function correctly. I didn't like the sound of that. Ceased to function correctly. Like I was a machine that could break down. The clock on the wall read 6:15 a.m. 32 minutes until whatever was going to happen would happen. I had to make a choice, give up and become one of those things, or fight back somehow and probably die in the process. I looked around the diner again, this time searching for anything that might help. The emergency radio was the key to all this. It had been talking to me all night, coordinating whatever was happening outside. If I could destroy it or find a way to jam its signal, maybe I could break free from whatever was controlling the situation. But first I had to figure out what the transition window actually meant. Why 6:47 a.m. specifically? And why only 3 minutes? The answer came to me as I stared at the clock. The sun would be coming up right around 6:47. Whatever these things were, they were connected to the darkness. When daylight hit, they'd have to retreat or change tactics. 3 minutes of vulnerability. That's all I'd get. I started planning. The clock on the wall ticked towards 6:47 a.m. with agonizing slowness. I'd spent the last half hour gathering everything I thought might help: the kitchen knife, a heavy flashlight, the fire extinguisher from behind the counter, and most importantly, a baseball bat I'd found in the storage closet that some previous employee must have left behind. I also found something else in that closet: an emergency radio manual and a small toolkit. The manual was mostly useless, standard instructions for weather alerts and amber alerts, but the toolkit had what I needed: small screwdrivers, wire cutters, electrical tape. If I could get to the radio's guts, maybe I could shut down whatever signal was controlling this nightmare. At 6:42 a.m., the radio crackled to life. Michael Anthony Rodriguez. The transition window opens in 5 minutes. Make your choice. I was crouched behind the counter, tools spread out in front of me, the radio within arm's reach. My plan was simple. The moment that window opened and those things started moving toward the building, I'd smash the radio and run for my car. The weird sedan out back couldn't be the only vehicle in the area. Maybe my Honda was hidden somewhere, or maybe I could hotwire one of the vehicles those things had arrived in. 6:45 a.m. Through the windows, I could see the first pale hints of dawn on the eastern horizon. Just a thin line of gray light, but it was there. The handprints on the glass seemed to shift and writhe in the changing light. 6:46 a.m. The radio spoke again. Michael Anthony Rodriguez. 30 seconds. The assembly is moving into position. I raised my head just enough to peer over the counter. Outside, the figures were definitely closer than they'd been an hour ago. Not quite at the windows yet, but close enough that I could make out individual details. The woman from the pickup truck stood directly in front of the main entrance, her too perfect face tilted upward like she was listening for something. The motorcyclist was at the east window, helmet still on, head turning slowly from side to side in mechanical sweeps. And there were others I hadn't seen before. A tall man in a business suit who looked like he'd been dead for weeks. A child, or something pretending to be a child, whose limbs bent the wrong way at every joint. Things that might have been human once but weren't anymore. 6:47 a.m. The radio let out a single long tone, like a starting bell. Every figure outside took a step forward simultaneously. I grabbed the screwdriver and jammed it into the radio's speaker grill, twisting hard to pop off the front panel. Sparks flew as I yanked out wires and circuit boards, destroying everything I could reach. The radio died with an electronic shriek. Immediately, the figures outside stopped moving. Some of them stumbled, like puppets whose strings had been cut. The woman in front stumbled sideways and caught herself against the window, leaving a new handprint on the glass. But they didn't disappear. They didn't retreat. After a few seconds of confusion, they started moving again. Slower now, less coordinated, but still approaching the building. I'd broken their communication system, but they were still functional. Time for Plan B. I grabbed the baseball bat and the flashlight and headed for the back exit. If I could get to one of their vehicles and drive out of here before they surrounded the building completely, I might have a chance. I unlocked the back door and eased it open, checking the parking area. The mysterious sedan was still there, but now I could see my Honda parked behind it, almost hidden in the shadows. They hadn't replaced my car, they just moved it. The keys were probably still in my pocket. I felt around and found them, along with my wallet and phone. Everything exactly where it should be. I stepped outside and immediately heard footsteps approaching from both sides of the building. They'd heard the door open and were converging on my position. I had maybe 30 seconds before they cut off my escape route. I sprinted toward my car, fishing the keys out as I ran. Behind me, I heard the figures coming around the corners of the building, not running but moving faster than they had been all night. Their footsteps were wrong, too heavy and too light at the same time, like they weren't quite sure how much a human body should weigh. I reached the Honda and jammed the key into the door lock. It turned easily, and I threw myself into the driver's seat, immediately hitting the door locks and starting the engine. The familiar sound of my beat-up four-cylinder was the most beautiful thing I'd heard all night. In the rearview mirror, I could see 3 figures approaching the car. The woman from the pickup truck, the motorcyclist, and a new one, an elderly man in pajamas whose face was completely blank. No eyes, no mouth, just smooth skin. I threw the car into reverse and floored it. The Honda shot backward and I felt it hit something. The faceless man probably. I didn't stop to check. I spun the wheel and peeled out toward the highway, gravel spraying behind me. In the mirror, I saw the other figures helping the one I'd hit to his feet. He was moving strangely, like something inside him had broken, but he was still upright. Still functional. I reached the highway and turned east toward town. The speedometer climbed 60, 70, 80 miles per hour. I wanted as much distance as possible between me and that diner. That's when I noticed the headlights behind me. All 3 vehicles, the pickup truck, the motorcycle, and the sedan were following me. They weren't speeding, just maintaining a steady pace about a quarter mile back. Like they weren't in any hurry. Like they knew where I was going. My phone still showed no signal, but as I got closer to town, bars started appearing. 1, then 2, then full signal. I tried calling 911 but got a busy signal. I tried calling Elena, my sister. Same thing. I tried calling my mom. The phone rang once, then Elena's voice answered. Michael? Where are you? We've been looking everywhere. Relief flooded through me. Elena? Thank God. Listen, something crazy happened at the diner. These things, they were pretending to be people and they had this radio dash. Michael, slow down. You're not making sense. Where are you right now? I checked the road signs. I'm on Highway 58, about 10 miles outside Bakersfield. I'm driving toward town. Good. Stay on the highway. We'll meet you at the hospital. Hospital? Why the hospital? Long pause. Then, Michael, you've been missing for 3 days. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. What? No, that's impossible. I was at work last night. I worked my regular shift. Michael, today is Thursday. You were supposed to come to Mom's birthday dinner on Monday, remember? When you didn't show up, we went looking for you. Your car was parked behind that diner, but you were nowhere to be found. The police have been searching. I looked at the clock on my dashboard. It read 7:23 a.m., exactly what I expected. But the date? Thursday. 3 days later than it should be. Elena, I need you to listen carefully. Don't trust anyone who shows up claiming to be me, okay? There are things that can look like people but aren't really people. If someone comes to your house, dash. Michael, you're scaring me. Just get to the hospital. We'll figure this out when you get here. The line went dead. I tried calling back, but now the phone wouldn't connect at all. In my rearview mirror, the 3 vehicles were still following me, maintaining that same distance. As I crested a hill, I could see Bakersfield spread out in the valley below. Thousands of lights, normal city life going about its business. But between me and the city, I could see something that made my blood freeze. Roadblock. Police cars, ambulances, fire trucks, all arranged across the highway with their lights flashing. A crowd of people stood around the vehicles. Probably my family, probably search and rescue volunteers, probably reporters. I should have been relieved. Help was waiting just a few miles ahead. But as I got closer, I started noticing details that didn't seem right. The police cars were parked at strange angles. The people in the crowd weren't moving much, just standing in perfect rows like they were waiting for instructions. And their movements, when they did move, had that same mechanical quality I'd seen at the diner. I slowed down as I approached the roadblock. A police officer stepped into the road and held up his hand, signaling me to stop. He looked normal enough, uniform, badge, the works. But his face was too symmetrical. Too perfect. Just like the woman at the diner. I pulled over and rolled down my window as he approached. Behind him, I could see more figures walking toward my car. Some wore police uniforms, others looked like EMTs or firefighters. A few looked like my family. The officer leaned down to my window. Michael Anthony Rodriguez. Please step out of the vehicle. The transition is complete. His voice was the same one that had been speaking through the radio all night. I looked past him at the crowd of people waiting by the roadblock. In the front row, I could see Elena, or something that looked like Elena. She was waving at me, smiling, but her movements were too slow and deliberate. Next to her stood my mom, my dad, my uncle Roberto. All of them looking perfect and wrong and patient. The officer reached for my door handle. "Michael Anthony Rodriguez. Your family is waiting." I floored the accelerator. The Honda shot forward, tires squealing on the asphalt. I swerved around the police officer and punched through the roadblock, scattering the two perfect figures as I raced toward town. Behind me, I heard no shouting, no sirens, no sounds of pursuit. Just silence. In my rearview mirror, I watched the crowd of fake people slowly turn to watch me go. None of them seemed upset or concerned. They just watched, like they knew I'd be back. I made it about 5 miles past the roadblock before my car started acting up. The engine began stuttering, the steering wheel vibrated in my hands, and the radio, which had been silent since I'd destroyed the one at the diner, suddenly crackled to life. Not the emergency alert system this time. Just regular radio. A country station playing an old Garth Brooks song. But the song was wrong. The words were the same, the melody was the same, but there was something underneath it. A whisper just barely audible beneath the music. "Michael Anthony Rodriguez. You cannot escape the service area." I punched the radio off, but the whispering continued. It wasn't coming from the radio anymore. It was coming from everywhere. The air vents, the speakers, even the upholstery seemed to be vibrating with that barely audible voice. "Michael Anthony Rodriguez. Return to your assigned location." The engine stuttered again, more violently this time. The speedometer dropped from 60 to 40, then to 20. I pressed the accelerator to the floor, but nothing happened. The car was slowing down on its own. Up ahead, I could see the lights of Bakersfield getting closer. Real city lights, real traffic, real people going about their normal lives. If I could just make it to the city limits, maybe whatever was controlling this situation would lose its grip. But the Honda rolled to a stop about 2 miles short of town, right in the middle of the empty highway. The engine died completely and all the lights on the dashboard went dark. I sat in the sudden silence, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles had gone white. Through the windshield, I could see the glow of the city ahead, so close I could probably walk there in an hour. But behind me, in the rearview mirror, 3 sets of headlights were approaching at a steady, unhurried pace. I tried the ignition. Nothing. Not even a click from the starter. The car was completely dead, like someone had pulled the battery. That's when I heard my phone ring. I looked at the screen, no caller ID, just a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered it. "Michael." The voice was Elena's, but different somehow. Flatter. More precise. "Where are you, Mijo?" "We're worried." "Where am I?" "Elena, where have you been for the last 3 days?" "I've been trapped at that diner with these things pretending to be people." "Michael, you're not making sense. You've been missing. We found your car behind the diner, but you weren't anywhere around. The police searched everywhere." I looked around at the empty highway, at my car that had just died in the middle of nowhere, at the headlights getting closer in my mirror. "Elena, listen to me very carefully. I need you to go to the police, the real police, not the ones at that roadblock. Tell them about the diner on Route 66, about the emergency radio system. Something is using it to dash." "Michael, you're scaring me. Just tell me where you are and we'll come get you." The 3 vehicles behind me were close enough now that I could make out details in my mirrors. The pickup truck, the motorcycle, the dark sedan. All maintaining perfect formation, like they were being controlled by the same intelligence. I'm on Highway 58, about 2 miles east of Bakersfield. My car just died. "Elena, whatever you do, don't trust anyone who claims to be me if I don't come home, okay? There are things that can copy people and dash." The line went dead. I tried calling back, but the phone showed no signal again. I was cut off, stranded, with 3 vehicles full of inhuman things closing in on my position. I grabbed the baseball bat from the passenger seat and got out of the car. If they wanted me, they'd have to take me fighting. The first vehicle, the pickup truck, pulled up about 50 feet away and stopped. The driver's door opened and the blonde woman stepped out. In the growing daylight, I could see her more clearly than I had at the diner. Her skin was too smooth, like plastic. Her movements were too fluid, like she was floating just above the ground. The motorcycle and sedan pulled up on either side of the truck, forming a semicircle around my position. Their occupants got out as well, the motorcyclist still wearing that full helmet, and from the sedan, a man in a business suit who looked like he'd been dead for weeks. They stood there for a moment, perfectly still, like they were waiting for instructions. Then the woman spoke. Not with her mouth, her lips didn't move at all. The voice came from somewhere else, everywhere else, just like the whispers in my car. "Michael Anthony Rodriguez. You have exceeded the boundaries of the service area. Please return to your assigned location. What service area? What are you talking about? Michael Anthony Rodriguez. You are a participant in Project Night Watch. Your assigned location is the diner. Your assigned duty is overnight security. Please comply. Project Night Watch. That was the first concrete information I'd gotten about what was happening to me. I never agreed to be part of any project, I said, raising the baseball bat. I just work at a diner. I serve coffee and mind my own business. The three figures took a step closer, moving in perfect synchronization. Michael Anthony Rodriguez. Compliance is not voluntary. Return to your assigned location or face termination. What happens if I refuse? The woman tilted her head at an impossible angle, like her neck was made of rubber. Michael Anthony Rodriguez. Previous subjects who refused compliance have been repurposed. That word sent chills down my spine. Repurposed. Like the people who'd been trapped here before me, turned into those things walking around the diner. I looked past them toward Bakersfield, calculating my chances of making it to the city limits on foot. The sun was getting higher now, and I could see traffic moving on the distant streets. Normal people living normal lives, completely unaware that something was hunting in the desert just outside their city. How long has this been going on? I asked, stalling for time. Michael Anthony Rodriguez. Project Night Watch has been active for 17 years. You are subject number 847. That meant there had been 846 people before me. All of them trapped at that diner, all of them given the same choice I was facing now. Join the assembly or be terminated. What happened to the others? The ones who refused. The woman's head snapped back to its normal position with a sound like cracking bones. Michael Anthony Rodriguez. They serve in other capacities. I thought about all those figures I'd seen surrounding the diner. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. All the people who'd been caught in this trap over the years, transformed into something else. And if I comply? If I go back to the diner? Michael Anthony Rodriguez. You will resume your duties. You will serve customers. You will monitor the radio. You will assist in the acquisition of new subjects. New subjects. They wanted me to help them trap other people. No, I said, gripping the bat tighter. I won't do it. The three figures moved closer, their movements becoming less human by the second. The woman's arms stretched longer than they should have been able to. The motorcyclist's helmet began to crack, revealing something underneath that definitely wasn't a human head. The businessman's suit split open at the seams, showing gray, mottled flesh beneath. I backed toward the edge of the highway where the asphalt met the desert scrub. If I could get into the rough terrain, maybe I could lose them long enough to reach the city. Michael Anthony Rodriguez. Final warning. Comply or face termination. Go to hell, I said and ran. I vaulted over the guardrail and sprinted into the desert, the baseball bat clutched in my right hand. Behind me, I heard the three figures give chase, but their pursuit didn't sound human anymore. No footsteps, just a sliding, scraping sound like something being dragged across the ground. The desert was harder to navigate than I'd expected. The ground was uneven, full of holes and rocks and thorny plants that grabbed at my clothes. But I kept running, heading toward the distant lights of Bakersfield. I risked a look back and immediately regretted it. They weren't human anymore. Not even close. The woman had become something long and snake-like, flowing across the desert floor like liquid. The motorcyclist had shed its helmet entirely, revealing a head that was just a mass of writhing tentacles. The businessman had split open completely, becoming something that looked like a walking tree made of rotting meat. And they were gaining on me. I ran harder, my lungs burning in the dry desert air. The city was still at least a mile away and these things were faster than me. I wasn't going to make it. That's when I heard the helicopter. It came from the north, flying low and fast, its rotors beating the air with a sound like thunder. As it got closer, I could see it was military olive green with no visible markings. The helicopter passed overhead, then circled back and hovered about 100 feet above me. A spotlight blazed down, pinning me in a circle of brilliant white light. Over the rotor noise, I heard a voice through a loudspeaker. Subject 847, stop running. You are in violation of containment protocols. I looked back at the three creatures chasing me. They had stopped when the helicopter arrived, like they were waiting for new instructions. The voice from the helicopter continued, Subject 847, you are outside the designated test area. Return immediately or face termination. Test area. They weren't just running some kind of supernatural experiment. This was military, government, and I was the lab rat. But I kept running. Whatever they were testing, whatever Project Night Watch was really about, I wasn't going to be part of it anymore. The helicopter paced me as I ran, the spotlight tracking my movement across the desert floor. Behind me, the three creatures had resumed their pursuit, but they were moving more cautiously now, like they were waiting for orders. I was maybe half a mile from the city limits when the helicopter opened fire. Not at me, at the ground in front of me. Bullets kicked up clouds of dust and debris, creating a barrier I couldn't cross. I veered left, but more gunfire cut off that route too. Then right, same thing. They were hurting me, forcing me back toward the highway, back toward those things that wanted to drag me to the diner. I stopped running and looked up at the helicopter, shielding my eyes against the spotlight. "What do you want?" I shouted. The voice from the loudspeaker was calm, professional. "Subject 847, you volunteered for Project Nightwatch. Your participation is essential to ongoing research into paranormal containment and behavioral modification. Return to your assigned location." I never volunteered for anything. I just work at a diner. Negative, Subject 847. You signed the appropriate waivers when you accepted employment. Please review your hiring paperwork. Hiring paperwork. I tried to remember filling out forms when I started working at Mel's, but the memories were fuzzy. Had there been more paperwork than usual? Fine print I hadn't read carefully? "This is illegal," I yelled. "You can't just experiment on people. Project Nightwatch operates under classified federal authority. Your rights as a civilian are suspended for the duration of the experiment." The three creatures had caught up to me now, surrounding me in a triangle. Up close, I could see that they weren't entirely inhuman. There were still traces of the people they used to be. The woman's face was still partially visible in the snake-like thing she'd become. The motorcyclist's tentacles moved with human-like gestures. They had been people once. People like me, trapped in the same situation, transformed when they tried to escape. "How long?" I asked the helicopter. "How long do I have to stay at that diner?" Project Nightwatch is scheduled to conclude in 18 months. Upon successful completion, all subjects will be debriefed and released. Released? They made it sound like summer camp instead of a nightmare that had already cost 846 people their humanity. And if I refuse? Termination is the only alternative to compliance. I looked around at the three creatures, at the helicopter circling overhead, at the lights of Bakersfield so close and yet impossibly far away. I thought about my family, probably going crazy with worry, searching for me in all the wrong places. I thought about Elena answering the phone with that flat, emotionless voice. Had they gotten to my family too? Were the people at that roadblock really my relatives, or just more experiments wearing familiar faces? The woman creature slithered closer, her voice echoing in my head without her moving her mouth. "Michael Anthony Rodriguez. Choose." I had two options. Go back to the diner and spend 18 months as a lab rat, helping to trap other innocent people, or die right here in the desert and let them transform my body into another one of their creatures. Neither option was acceptable. But maybe there was a third choice. I looked up at the helicopter, then at the three creatures surrounding me. Project Nightwatch was a government experiment, which meant it had funding, oversight, people who were responsible for it. People who could be held accountable if the right information got to the right places. "I'll go back," I said loudly, making sure the helicopter's microphones could pick up my voice. "But I want to make a deal." The creatures stopped moving. The helicopter continued circling, but the voice from the loudspeaker remained silent. "I'll cooperate with your experiment," I continued, "but I want proof that my family is safe. Real proof, not just phone calls or fake people at roadblocks. And I want information about what you're really doing here." Still silence from above. "If you want my cooperation, you need to give me something in return. Otherwise, you can terminate me right now and find another test subject." It was a bluff. I didn't want to die, and I definitely didn't want to be transformed into one of those creatures. But I also couldn't just meekly return to the diner and pretend none of this had happened. The helicopter circled once more, then the voice returned. "Subject 847, return to your assigned location. Your requests will be considered." Not exactly a guarantee, but it was better than nothing. I started walking back toward the highway, escorted by the three creatures and the helicopter overhead. With each step, I tried to memorize every detail of what I'd seen and heard. Project Nightwatch. 17 years of operation. 847 subjects. Military involvement. Paranormal containment and behavioral modification. If I survived the next 18 months, if I really was released at the end of the experiment, I was going to make sure the world knew what had happened here. The creatures loaded me into the back of the pickup truck. They were human-shaped again now, though their movements remained slightly off. The helicopter peeled away as we started the drive back to the diner. Through the rear window, I watched Bakersfield disappear behind us, along with any hope of immediate escape. But I wasn't giving up. I was just changing tactics. Project Nightwatch wanted to study me? Fine. I'd study them right back. And when this was over, when I'd learned everything I could about their operation, I was going to burn the whole thing to the ground. The diner appeared on the horizon, its neon sign flickering in the morning light. Home sweet home for the next 18 months. But this time I wasn't going in as a victim. I was going in as a spy.